It's totally possible to become fluent in English on your own without any studying abroad experience. It's even possible for a punk. What's up, my homies? It's Hina here, and today I'm gonna talk about how I became fluent in English. So I can speak English like this right now, but back then I couldn't speak English. This is an audio of me trying to speak English 7 years ago.
Yes. So weekend, I went to park, and I played with friends.
So as you can see, I was using a lot of ums and so yes, and the words I wanted to say weren't really coming out, and I couldn't talk smoothly. But with the method I'm about to show you, I was able to improve my English to this level, even while living in Japan. So today, I'll be showing you how I did it. But before that, I'll share a little bit about my experience studying English. So I was born in Japan and raised by Japanese parents. But suddenly, when I was little, my parents had to move to Canada. And I was not happy at all having to leave Japan. But my parents were like, "We'll buy you Shirobanya Family no Morinoki no Gakko. So you have to come with us." So right away I was like, yes sir, I'm definitely going. And that's how my life in Canada started. So my parents thought that you could buy Shirobanya Family in Canada. But of course they don't sell them over there, so they couldn't buy me it like they promised. I still remember how hard I was crying from the shock, and even the employees at the toy store were like really worried. My family calls this incident the tears of Walmart. Now, hearing this, you guys may think, of course you can speak fluent English because you lived abroad, but actually I haven't been able to use my experience living in Canada in good use. Once I came back to Japan, no one around me could speak English anymore. So being in a place where I didn't speak any English, I forgot it just like that. The only people around me were Yankee, who couldn't even speak proper Japanese to begin with. After coming back to Japan, I didn't study abroad anywhere. And without an environment to speak English, by the time I took that video 7 years ago, my English was so broken that I got lower test grades on English than on Japanese. So my mother saw the situation and she wanted me to go to an English school. But I was a rebellious kid back then, so I begged her to use the money to buy me a motorcycle instead of putting me in an English school. So when I actually wanted to learn English and I asked my mother to put me in an English school, she said, "You're the one that wanted to buy a motorcycle. Figure it out yourself." So I had to figure out a way to learn English by myself. So the method I'm going to show you guys today is a method I used to teach myself English when I was in high school. It's a method where you can learn English without having to go study abroad anywhere, and how I was able to really grow my English skills even while living in Japan. Honestly, I don't think it really matters if you lived abroad or studied abroad. Being able to think in English and talk fluently is everyone's goal in the end, right? So there are people who go abroad and are not able to speak English, but there are also people who are able to speak fluent English while living in Japan. So I think the biggest difference between these people is whether they are studying English with the right method or not. So I usually teach English to people, and these people are mainly working adults, and I call them hinakitsu. And there are students that have been able to pick up fluent English even while living in Japan. So even if you're in Japan and you don't have any money to study abroad, as long as you're studying English with the right method, you can become fluent. And this method I'm about to teach you guys today is something anyone can do as long as they commit. So I'm hoping that this video will help you guys. So when I wanted to relearn English again, I thought about what makes a person fluent in English. Someone that's fluent in English is a person that's able to speak and hear without having to translate from Japanese to English. So there's one thing that I really focused on, and that was being able to speak and listen to English without having to translate from Japanese. I practiced being able to understand English phrases in English and being able to speak and listen in English. In other words, I practiced building an English brain. So now I'm going to explain everything I did to build this English brain. So there are 3 important elements that I think really helped me build an English brain. 1, vocabulary. 2, pronunciation, and 3, outputting 24/7. I'm gonna talk about vocabulary first. Whether you like vocabulary or not, in order to speak English, You're gonna have to study it no matter what. For vocabulary books, I personally used Kinfure because I was studying for the TOEIC. And I also used 英単語ターゲット1900 and Shistan. All of these materials are great and I recommend them, but honestly, I don't think it really matters what vocabulary book you use. I think it's more about how you approach trying to remember these English words. I use these 3 steps when studying vocabulary. So 1, remember the words with an image. And 2, learn how to use the words in context. And 3, making my own sentences. When I switched to remembering words as an image, it was a life changer. In school, I think we're taught vocabulary like this. Apple, ringo, motorcycle, bike, situation, 状態. But the problem here is if you try to remember English words with Japanese translations, you're always going to be translating from Japanese to English in your head, which takes way too much time when you're trying to listen or speak English. Before, I had tried to remember vocabulary by writing the word in Japanese translation, and I also tried methods like writing them down on sticky notes and putting them all over my room. But both of these weren't the best way to study vocabulary. I thought back to how I learned vocabulary when living in Canada. And I remembered in preschool, my teacher taught us words like this. This is an apple. This is a motorcycle. This is a cigarette. This is a punk. So just like that, I was taught vocabulary by image. For example, if you're asked, what does it mean to think? I think you would be like, think means think. And this happens because you just learn the word as it is in Japanese. So I want you to try remembering English vocabulary with this similar sense. And the best way to do this and build an English brain is to remember English words as an image. Now, if there is a word that is hard to imagine like painful, you should look up on the internet for images. So go on Google Images and type in the word. So painful, right? And then type in definition. And then you can find an image. Oh, look at these guys. These guys are really feeling pain. I'm sure they got into a fight. She got punched in the head. He got punched in the ear. And this guy, I think he got punched in the stomach. Man, these poor kids. 今度うちが対マンで勝つ方法を教えたるよ. Of course, I needed to know what the words mean in Japanese first. But after understanding what the word means, I tried to remember them as an image as much as possible. So my vocabulary book looked like this. I would draw pictures beside the words and tried as much as possible not to use the Japanese translations. Now, step 2. Next, you should learn how the vocabulary is used in context. What I did was look at the example sentence in the vocabulary book and try to imagine the example sentence as well. So here we have the word impulse, and this is from Shistan. Impulse means shodo, and we have this example sentence, feel an impulse to shout, which means 叫びたい衝動を感じる. So try and imagine the situation of the sentence in your head as you pronounce this sentence. This is literally me when I found out that they didn't sell Shirobanya family in Canada. Now, step 3. Using the example sentence in your vocabulary book, I want you to try and make your own sentence. So, for example, we just learned the example sentence, feel an impulse to shout. And we can see that the word impulse can be used with the word to as impulse to. So this means that you can make your own sentences like, feel an impulse to shoplift. Feel an impulse to punch. Feel an impulse to steal a motorcycle. The last sentence is a true story about my senpai who was literally addicted to stealing motorcycles. He always had an impulse to steal motorcycles. So when he was caught by the police, he ended up going to juvenile until he was 20. Anyways, I recommend that you relate your personal life and the things closest to you when doing this. So to sum up the vocabulary section. First, try remembering English words as an image and try your best not to use Japanese translations. Then 2, learn how the word is used in a sentence. And then step 3, try making your own sentences using that word. So the next important thing to be able to speak English fluently is pronunciation. It is so important to be able to pronounce like a native speaker. And this is because there is this one teaching that I always teach my students. And that is, if you can pronounce English like a native speaker, then you can hear the native pronunciations. So most of my students have only lived in Japan, and they're very skeptical because they don't believe that they can be able to speak English like a native speaker. But I promise you, as long as you have the right approach, it's definitely possible. The method I used and have seen my students really improve the pronunciation is called modeling. So modeling is a simple two-step method. First, listen to the native speaker. And then second, try mimicking the native pronunciations as much as possible right after. So I'll show you an example.
We sat down face to face.
We sat down face to face.
We sat down face to face.
We sat down face to face. So even if it's one word at a time, I want you to carefully listen to the pronunciation of the native speaker. By repeating this over and over, you should try to bring your pronunciation as close to the native speaker as possible. The closer your pronunciation is to the native speaker's pronunciation, the more you will be able to hear native English. I really highly recommend this because it allows you to carefully listen and analyze the native pronunciations. I know there are a lot of books on Hatsuon Kigo, but I don't think you really need to use them. All I did was practice modeling using English phrase videos on YouTube. I would choose a phrase and just keep on repeating over and over until my pronunciation was close to a native's. For those advanced, I recommend you practice modeling using TEDx talk videos. So I lived abroad, right? So it was much easier for me to pick up the pronunciations. But I have students who've never studied abroad, but they've been able to pick up native pronunciations using the modeling method. One student who practiced this method every day for 3 months saw drastic changes in their pronunciation and listening skills. It can just be 5 minutes, 10 minutes every day. As long as you continue, then you'll be able to pick up the pronunciation of a native speaker. The sounds of English and the Japanese are so different, and we use different muscles, so it's definitely going to be hard to adjust first. But if you carefully work on listening to the native sounds and keep on repeating over and over, then it's definitely possible. If you really struggle pronouncing a word, go on Google and type in the word that you are finding hard to pronounce. So in this case, motorcycle. And then type in pronunciation. Then this comes up, and if you click here, it gives you the perfect pronunciation.
Motorcycle.
And if you click here and play again, it gives you a slower pronunciation.
Motorcycle.
And then you can also change from American pronunciation to British pronunciation, which is pretty neat. And this part is my favorite, and it's so good, but it also judges your pronunciation over here. So click here, motorcycle. So I got a good score here, but if I pronounce it in Japanese English, motorcycle. See, it tells me that I did it wrong. And then you can also hear what you pronounced over here.
motorcycle,
Motorcycle.
motorcycle,
Motorcycle.
And like this, you can compare the correct pronunciation to what you pronounced. And it shows you perfectly what you need to do to improve your pronunciation. There are so many amazing free resources out there, so use them. But can I just say one thing? Don't use the shadowing method. I absolutely hate the shadowing method and people who recommend it. So shadowing is basically like a learning method where you follow the example sentence a little behind, almost like a shadow. I don't recommend it because you can't analyze the native pronunciations properly, as you become too focused on staying at the native speaker's pace. For pronunciations, I want you to take lots of time analyzing the native sounds and improving your pronunciations. If you do this, not only will your speaking level change drastically, but also your listening skills too. I made other videos that you can watch on my Line account where we break down and analyze the English pronunciations and practice the modeling method together with daily English phrases. So please check it out if you're interested. Finally, the last thing I recommend you do in order to speak fluent English is to keep on outputting. I want you to try and narrate your actions, what you see, and your daily thoughts, everything in English. I know this sounds really challenging at first, but just start with baby steps. So with the words and pronunciations that you inputted, I want you to start using them in your daily life. You can start by just naming the things around you. So I see a McDonald's, blue
sky, clouds, a lot of cars, then you should gradually start making your own sentences like, the sky is very blue, it's very beautiful, the clouds are very clear today. So I had an impulse to buy McDonald's pancakes this morning, so I bought it. Very good. I found my favorite place. It's closed. No. So it was closed, so I'm gonna head back home. So just like the clips you saw, narrate your life in English. And as you're doing this, make sure that you are talking aloud to yourself with the right pronunciation. I know it might be embarrassing talking aloud outside at first, but don't worry. And if you're in a public place, at least mouth the words.
So like this, I want you to try outputting the vocabulary and pronunciations you learned on a daily basis. The reason why I don't recommend you study so much grammar using grammar books is because I think what really matters is being able to communicate what you really want to say. But honestly, the fastest way to be able to speak English is to stop caring so much about these grammar rules. You can just say, I have a friend, he likes to steal bikes. Like, you're saying the same thing, and I think that's all that really matters in the end. Of course, it's better if you know middle school level grammar to start off with, but when you're first studying to try to speak English, it gets boring if you care so much about grammar rules. What matters is you being able to communicate yourself, so try forming sentences as much as you can. This is better for your motivation, in my opinion, and you can always learn grammar later. There are so many ways to say the same sentences in English, and there are no rules that you need to follow 100%. What really matters is people being able to understand what you're saying in English. So just keep on outputting 24/7 while keeping this in mind. So in summary, the 3 things I focused on to be able to speak English is vocabulary, pronunciation, and outputting everything you learned 24/7. By focusing on these 3 things, it's totally possible to be able to speak English even while living in Japan. And my goal is to help people's English journey through videos. I have plans to make more videos about tips and study methods to help you learn English, so make sure you subscribe. If you have any questions, please leave them down below. Alright, this will be it for today. See you guys!